to Cody Talks NFL, presented by Blitzalytics.com. And here's your host, Cody Manning.
And welcome into the Monday edition of Cody Talks NFL. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed some of those good games yesterday. Some were blowouts, some had nothing on the line. But I'm going to go ahead and get in today's episode so you get you guys out of here. I'm sure people are probably traveling. Maybe you're more than likely listening to the audio version of this as you travel to see your family for Christmas or the holidays this week. I'm going to go ahead and get into it. There were some new news items that came out over the weekend. I just put that in my episode throughout this one that I'll cover as I kind of recap these games that happened throughout the weekend. At first, though, I'm going to start with tonight's last Monday night game of the year. Can't believe it's here. It's the last Monday night game, so enjoy it. At least we got a good one that has some implications on the line. Packers are at Minnesota to face the Vikings. A little news note on the Vikings: because of the Rams' loss from Saturday, that actually clinched their playoff berth, so they're officially in the playoffs. And then obviously they need to win this game, and then if they win next week, and then if the Packers somehow were to lose against the Lions next week, the Vikings can technically still win the NFC North. And then if some other games fall their way, they can actually climb up to the number 2 seed. Packers need to keep on winning. Obviously, if they win this game, they'll win the NFC North, and then they'll just want to keep on winning so they can try to at least get the number 2 seed, maybe have a chance to get the number 1 seed next week as well. As far as injuries heading into tonight's matchup on the Packers side, Josh Needham is out with an elbow and tricep injury, and then Dean Lowry is questionable with an ankle injury. And then Dalvin Cook has already been ruled out with this chest injury. Alexander Mattison is listed as questionable, but it does sound like they're going to sit him because they're already clinched in the playoffs, so they just want to make sure they go in healthy. Because they probably understand, more than likely, even if they win tonight, the Packers are probably going to beat the Lions. So they just want to be healthy as they can be, as they'll probably be on the road as a wild card team in the NFC. As far as how this game's going to go, it's kind of tough for me to predict. If Dalvin Cook was for sure going to play, if Madison was for sure going to play, I would definitely lean towards the Vikings because of their running game, and the Packers do struggle to stop the run. The Vikings, obviously, their defense plays a lot tougher at home. Packers, even though they're sitting at 11-3, they're kind of up and down. Some games they look great, some games they look subpar. I do think with the Cook injury, that's going to give them a better chance to win this game. You know what, though? I think for some reason I could see the defense getting after Rodgers, forcing him into mistakes and bottling up their run game. So I think it's going to be a close game, and I think I think Mike Boone is the guy that's going to be the running back for the Vikings tonight. And with their running scheme, he's going to be just good enough to take it to the Packers defense on the ground game, and then that's going to help open up things to guys like Adam Thielen. That's going to help open up things to like Stephon Diggs. So I think the Vikings are going to have more chances to score compared to the Packers. I think it's going to be a great game, though. I think it's going to come down to who has the ball last. Because the Vikings are at home, they want a shot to win the NFC North. I'm a lean towards the Vikings. I always thought the Packers and Vikings were going to split this series anyways. The Packers won the game earlier in the season, so I'm going to go ahead and take the Vikings on like a 24-21 type win tonight. And then I'm going to go ahead and get into this past weekend's matchup, starting with those games that happened on Saturday. The Texans barely squeezed out a win over the Bucs. They won 23-20. Starting with the Texans, since they are the winner in this game, and obviously they will be a playoff team now. They're sitting at a 10-5 record. They clinched the AFC South, so they will be hosting a playoff game come January. But they did see an injury to the guy that we always see go down to injuries. Will Fuller did suffer a groin injury. It actually came out this morning that he's more than likely that's going to keep him out for 3 weeks. So it actually sounds like not only he's going to be out this next week, he'll be out during the wild card weekend, and then they're hoping that maybe he can be back by divisional weekend if they were to win their wild card weekend game. So that's a huge injury for them. Deshaun Watson's numbers typically go down when he's out of the lineup, so that's going to hurt their chances. Obviously, they're going to want to win next week because if the Chiefs were to lose next week, they still can jump them for the 3rd seed. But as of right now, Texans are sitting at the 4th seed. More likely, that's where they will end up once the playoffs are locked in after the Week 17 games. As far as the Bucs, they're 7-8. They have a chance to at least get to 500 next week against the Falcons. And then it came out over this weekend that they're expected to bring back Jameis Winston for the 2020 season, either on the franchise tag or the transition tag. Obviously, after Saturday's performance, that makes you question. He had a 4-pick performance, and it wasn't one of those games where he threw the multiple interceptions, but also had a good game. He just flat out had a bad game, even though he still gave him a chance to win at the end of the game. I mean, I get it and I don't, right? It's a flip of the coin with Jameis Winston. You kind of get it because what better options are out there? They're not going to be in position to draft one of the better quarterbacks in the draft. The free agency class of quarterbacks is really not that great. So it kind of makes sense for them to maybe do the franchise tag or the transition tag, do at least one more year. And then if he doesn't grow underneath Bruce Arians in the 2 seasons, then maybe you can move on and see what options you have either through the draft or free agency. As far as the next game, the Bills and the Patriots. Patriots did win this weekend. They won 24-17 against the Bills. It was a really great game. Came down to the wire. The Patriots are now sitting at a 12-3 record with that win. They are now the AFC East champs. They're going to host a playoff game. They're currently locked into the number 2 seed. All they need to do is beat the Dolphins next week, and they'll be locked in as the number 2 seed. They'll get the first round bye. But obviously, if they lose and the Chiefs were to win next week, they would drop down and they would lose their first round bye. So they're going to be going all out against Miami on Sunday. And then the Bills, they're sitting now at a 10-5 record. They're actually locked into the 5th seed. So no matter if they win or lose next week, they're going to be the 5th seed. So it's more likely it's setting up for a Bills-Texans matchup in the wild card weekend. Barring, like I said, if the Chiefs were to lose and the Texans win next week, it would be a Chiefs-Bills matchup in the wild card. So I'm sure if you're a Bills fan and you're a Bill, you play for the Bills, you coach for the Bills, I think I would much rather face the Texans than the Chiefs. So I'm sure they're kind of hoping that the Texans will end up staying at that 4th seed in the playoffs. And like I said, guys, I'm going to kind of go right through this. There's not much to talk about it with it being the end of the season. I'm not going to dive into where I stand on teams just because, like I said, I'm going to have some off-season episodes dedicated to that. And it's Christmas week, so I'm sure we all want to just get in and out of this episode today. I'm going to go into that last Saturday game, though. The Rams lost to the 49ers. It was a great game. It was a shootout. It looked like the Rams were going to win, and the 49ers fought back. Back and forth game in the second half of that game. 49ers did win 34-31. 49ers are now sitting at a 12-3 record, and because of yesterday's Seahawks loss, they are now back as the number 1 seed in the NFC. And then if they win next week's game against the Seahawks, which was flexed to the Sunday night game, so that will be the last game of the 2019 season, they will win the NFC West, and they'll lock in the number 1 seed of the NFC, and they'll have home field advantage in the NFC. So it's a lot is on the line in that Sunday night matchup against the Seahawks. I actually, because I'll talk about it later when I get to the Seahawks game, I think it's probably going to happen. Spoiler alert for my Friday episode, just because of the injuries that just happened to the Seahawks and how they kind of been stumbling towards the back end of the season. Now the Rams, though, they're sitting at 8-7 because of the loss. Like I talked about, it clinched the Vikings' berth, so that eliminated the Rams for the playoffs. They still have a chance to finish 9-7 and finish over 500, but it sounds like there's going to be a shakeup in the Rams. Multiple sources are reporting that there's going to be a shakeup on McVay's coaching staff, which includes their defensive coordinator, Wade Phillips. So it sounds like they're going to try to change up some things and see if that can help them in the 2020 season. I do want to say this too. I saw some Rams fans on Twitter saying this. I saw some other people trying to say on Twitter saying, like, if Sean McVay has one more season like this, I don't know how much longer he's going to last. Come on, get real. You're talking about they can't. If they win this weekend, that'll be 3 straight winning seasons. They went to the Super Bowl last year, and things just didn't go right this year. And they're going to be in a tough NFC conference, finishing 9-7 and just missing the playoffs. Let's be real here. That's all I got to say on anybody that thinks McVay should be on the hot seat for next year. That's just ridiculous. And don't live in the moment. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get into the Sunday matchups. I'm going to start with the 1 p.m. games, start with the Joe Burrow. end up going to overtime. But the Dolphins found a way to win after they gave up. They're up like 30. I want to say they were up like 32-16 at one point in the fourth quarter, and then the Bengals somehow stormed back, but took them to overtime. But the Dolphins ended up winning as they kicked the field goal towards the back end of the overtime. But starting with the Dolphins, they won 38-35. They're now sitting at a 4-11 record. As far as injury, Jamal Witz did not return with a shoulder injury. There looks like they're sitting around the 5th pick right now, so we'll see how next week plays out. I'm not going to dive into like where the draft picks are unless they lock in like the Bengals. Bengals, because of this loss, and they're now sitting at 1-14. They are now locked in the number 1 pick. They are officially on the clock. And for the next, I think it's going to end up being Joe Burrow. But for the next 3 or 4 months, everybody's going to be debating if they should go Joe Burrow or Chase Young. We'll see. Some people think they could stick with Andy Dalton and get Chase Young. I don't agree with that. It's time for them to get some new blood at the quarterback position. As far as an injury, though, William Jackson for the Bengals, he did suffer a right shoulder injury. And then since these are non-playoff teams, I'm just going to keep it moving for you guys. And then on the next game, it looks like Le'Veon did get his revenge, like I thought. Like I said on the Friday episode, the Jets upset the Steelers. They won 16-10. Jets are now sitting at a 6-9 record. No news or injuries for the Jets to report. They have a chance. They're facing the Bills next week. Nothing's really on the line, so they're going to finish with a 6-10, or maybe they can get to a 7-9 record and see if they can carry some momentum into their season next year. As far as the Steelers, though, they're sitting at 8-7. Because of this loss, they have lost control of the 6th seed. The Titans are currently now in the 6th seed because of this loss, and this loss came with a bunch of injuries. James Conner did suffer a thigh injury. Marquise Pouncey also suffered a knee injury. And then Duck Hodges actually got benched because he threw 2 picks at the beginning of the game. Mason Rudolph came in, but then he ended up getting hurt, and he left with a shoulder injury and was seen with his arm in a sling. And then Duck Hodges ended up coming back in and just was unable to lead a comeback at all. So Steelers, they're sitting at an 8-7 record. How they get in next week is they need a win, and they need the Titans to lose to the Texans. If that happens, then they will sneak in at a 9-7 record as a 6th seed. And they will be facing the Ravens, who more than likely will be having RG3 at quarterback and some backups in there. But keep in mind, at the end of the day, these teams got to dress 46 people. So I feel like majority of the starters will play outside maybe a guy like Earl Thomas and maybe some other veteran players that they want to rest up for the playoffs. But I definitely don't anticipate Lamar Jackson going against the Steelers. So the Steelers will have a shot to get into the playoffs, and obviously they'll be big fans of the Texans against the Titans. I'm going into the next matchup, which you could call the Chase Young Bowl. The Giants did end up beating Redskins. This game also went to overtime. Giants won 41-35. Giants are sitting at a 4-11 record. Danny Dimes came back to being a little Danny Dimes after his up and down year. He actually became the first rookie quarterback to have 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in a game. Even though he's had an up and down performance throughout the year, even with his injuries, he has shown a lot of promise as a rookie. So Giants fans at least can look forward to what that offense can be next year. And then as far as injuries for the Giants, Alec Ogletree did not return after hurting his back. The Redskins now, they're sitting at a 3-12 record. They are at the number 3 pick, if I remember that correctly. But they did have some injuries. Dwayne Haskins, their rookie quarterback, he ended up getting carted off with an ankle injury. Now, he told reporters after the game that the x-rays came back negative, but he will undergo an MRI for further evaluation. He added that he did want to return the game, but owner Daniel Snyder instructed him to sit out the remainder of the game, which makes sense. They're out of the playoff picture. There's no sense for him to further any damage to that injury and make his offseason more of a rehab than preparing to compete for the 2020 season. And then also Danny Johnson suffered a hand injury, and Morgan Moses also hurt his knee in that matchup. And then I'm going to go ahead and get into this next game. I'll go through this quickly because this game didn't really have much on the line, but the Colts completely dominated the Panthers. They won 38-6. Colts are now sitting at a 7-8 record. It did come out earlier Jim Irsay told Ian Rappaport that the Colts are not holding out hope that Luck will return in 2020. They're going into the offseason to proceed as Andrew is officially retired. And that's been the sounding like I've heard from multiple podcasts and everything that people that actually have had conversations with him. It sounds like he's done with football. So it doesn't sound like he will be back, and they're expected to be in the quarterback market. It sounded like more in the draft over the free agency, so we'll see. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett has kind of came back down to earth over this last half of the season, so they obviously either want to bring in some competition or maybe use him as a bridge quarterback, because remember, they only signed him through next year, and then after next year, his contract's up. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that in the offseason, and obviously I'll be covering that as we get through the offseason. And then Quentin Nelson did suffer a concussion yesterday, so we'll see if he's able to come back for the last game. And then DJ Moore for the Panthers also suffered a concussion. The Panthers are now sitting at a 5-10 record, which sucks. It's because Christian McCaffrey is having a great of a season. It's kind of gone to a waste now, and Will Grier was not that great yesterday either. So it seems like I still believe Cam Newton's going to be their quarterback, barring a new coach wanting to move on from him and getting a younger quarterback or maybe a different veteran quarterback in free agency. I'm going to keep it moving, though. The next game, Ravens handled their business against the Browns, even though it looked like the Browns might pull off the upset at the beginning of the game. Ravens end up winning 31-15. Ravens are now at 13-2 record. Like I said, they're probably going to bench starters because of that win. They locked in the number 1 seed in the AFC. They have home field advantage. They have nothing to play for next week. But it did they had a little bit of serious injury. If this guy is not going to be 100% come time that divisional round matchup, but Mark Ingram had a calf injury. The reporters told him that Harbaugh told reporters that there's no structural issues. It sounds like it's a calf strain. He's going to have an MRI today to confirm his status. So they're just going to obviously try to get him as healthy as he can be for that divisional matchup in the playoffs, because they're going to need him. I know Justice Hill and the guys like Gus Edwards are complimentary backups, but Mark Ingram provides that team not only just a great player, but that moxie, that swag that you kind of want on that type of team that they've had this whole year. So that's something to monitor. And then the Browns, they're sitting at a 6-9 record. Maybe they get to 7-9 because they have the Bengals next week, but just a major disappointing, definitely one of the most disappointing teams in 2019. And I'm going to keep it moving for you guys. Jacksonville and Atlanta. I ain't going to lie, I didn't really see much of this matchup. They didn't really show much on Red Zone yesterday. But the Falcons did win 24-12. No news or injuries on the Falcons. They're sitting at a 6-9 record. They have the Bucs this weekend. Maybe they get to 7-9. It actually sounds like they're kind of undecided on where they're going to go with Dan Quinn. I mean, I guess if they finish strong, I can see that making the case for them to keep Dan Quinn and maybe give him one more year. Still don't necessarily agree with that, but we'll see. That's going to be the thing to watch for the Falcons after next week's game as we get to Black Monday and they start firing coaches. And speaking of firing coaches, Jaguars, they're sitting at a 5-10 record now after that loss, but it came out before the game. There is a good chance that Doug Marrone, the head coach, and GM Dave Caldwell could return following the firing of Tom Coughlin, and Tony Khan could take on an increased role. I don't necessarily think that's a good move. It's never a good move to just get rid of one of the executive vice presidents, but still kind of keep the coach and then maybe bring in somebody new, and then that guy ends up getting rid of him. I think it just needs to be a complete regime change. Bring in a new GM, bring in a new head coach, and just start this whole thing over and just try to build back to what you guys had a couple of years ago, even though it's going to be kind of hard because some of those guys are already gone from a couple of years ago. So we'll see what the Jaguars do. I mean, they're probably going to judge it on how this team finishes. They just got beat by 2 scores against the Falcons. They got the Colts this weekend, and if the Colts beat up on them on Sunday at home in Jacksonville, I could still see them moving on from Doug Marrone. I'm going to go ahead and get to the next matchup, though. The Saints did beat the Titans 38-28. In that effort, Michael Thomas did break Marvin Harrison's record for most receptions in a single season. That lasted since 2002. It's been a long time since that record even got close. I know Antonio Brown got close to the record a few years ago, but the Saints did win after the Titans were up on them like 14-0. Looked like the Titans were going to pull off the upset, but then Saints stormed back, and the Titans just could not compete with them after that. But yeah, Eli Apple did suffer an ankle injury for the Saints, and Marcus Williams did also injure his groin. So a couple big injuries to their secondary. That defense has kind of been getting banged up with injuries over the last couple of weeks. They're sitting at a 12-3 record. They got the Panthers this week, so I anticipate they'll get to a 13-3 record. Obviously, they're going to want to see the Packers lose tonight. They're going to want because so they can have a shot at the number 2 seed. And then I believe if the Seahawks beat the 49ers next week, the Saints, if they win next week, can actually jump all the way up to the number 1 seed. So a lot of seeding is going to be on the line for the NFC next Sunday. So it's going to be very interesting to watch on how all those games play out. I definitely think they're going to beat the Panthers, though. Spoiler alert for Friday's episode. But yeah, they're more likely going to get to a 13-3 record and have a chance to get at least a first-round bye. And then obviously they're going to hope that they can get that number 1 seed. Titans, though, they're sitting at an 8-7 record. As I talked about when I talked about the Steelers game, they're sitting at the number 6 seed in the AFC. Now, if they do win that game, they're going to lock themselves in to the 6th seed. Now, obviously, if they lose against the Texans next week, they're going to want to hope to see the Steelers lose, and then they're going to want to see some other games go their way, which I'll talk about when I get to this Raiders game matchup, because the Raiders, they had a shot for the playoffs. And I'm going to go ahead and actually get into that because I'm going to go ahead and jump into those afternoon games. And speaking of the Raiders, they did win 24-17. Now they're sitting at a 7-8 record. Here's how they get to the playoffs. They got to beat the Broncos next week, which is plausible. They need the Titans to lose to the Texans, which is definitely plausible. They need the Ravens to beat the Steelers. Now, obviously, without their starters, you could see the Steelers winning, but I can honestly see, because of how much that Steelers offense struggles, I could still see them losing to an RG3-led Ravens. So that's definitely plausible. And then they need I think it's because of like head-to-head matchups or whatever, similar opponents, how they do this playoff stuff. They need the Colts to beat the Jaguars. So to repeat that, they beat the Broncos, Texans beat the Titans, Ravens beat the Steelers, Colts beat the Jaguars, and Raiders are in at the number 6 seed. So that's definitely plausible. I can definitely see that happening. Will it? Maybe. Who knows? At least compared to last year, the Raiders have a chance entering the Week 17. So kudos to them. But LaMarcus Joyner did leave that game with a calf injury. So if he has to miss next week, that's going to be tough, because it's going to be tough to beat those Broncos, because Broncos have played pretty well since Drew Lock has came in. They're actually 3-1 since Drew Lock has became the starter. So it's going to be a tough matchup. They got to handle their business and then just hope things go their way. But I can definitely see them getting into an 8-8 record and being 500 and try to carry some type of momentum into next season. And then the Chargers, though, completely another disappointing team for me. I had such high expectations for them. They're sitting at a 5-10 record. No news or injuries came out for them. And then more like they're going to move on to Phil Rivers again. That's all this type of stuff I'll cover in the off-season episodes. And I'm just kind of giving you updates where they stand as we get to the week 17 matchups. And then next game is Detroit and Denver. Nothing on the line. Broncos just handled their business. They won 27-17. No news or injuries for either team. Broncos are sitting at a 6-9 record. Like I just talked about, they got the Raiders next week. I can see them beating the Raiders too, so they can get to a 7-9 record. They're going to maybe finish 6-10. More than likely, Drew Lock will be their quarterback next year to at least start the season, and we'll see if they got the quarterback and see if they can address some needs in the offseason. Lions, they're sitting at a 3-11-1 record, and because of how the games went, they actually jumped up, I believe, to the 3rd pick in the draft, so maybe they can get a Chase Young if things go their way next week. But yeah, no major news or injuries. And like I said, and they got the Packers next week, so more likely they're going to finish with a 3-12-1 record. And because nothing's on the line with those guys, I'm just going to keep this moving. And then Arizona had pulled off the upset against the Seahawks in Seattle. And what's more even baffling is they pretty much dominated them. The Cardinals won 27-13. And in that matchup, Kyler Murray left in the third quarter with a hamstring injury, and Brett Hundley ended up leading the victory. And and then as far as the Seahawks, then um, they're now sitting at an 11-4 record. They're sitting at the 5th seed. They could drop to the 6th seed if they lose next week and the Vikings win, or depending on the Packers-Vikings matchup, all that stuff. But there were some injuries. Chris Carson and CJ Procise, their number 1 and 2 backs at the current moment, are done for the season with a hip and arm injury. Hip for Carson, Procise with an arm injury. And then Dwayne Brown, their left tackle, who had a miss yesterday's game, is going to have knee surgery. Won't play against the Niners this week, but he could return in the postseason. Rob asked me a question. Could Beast Mode come back? Maybe. I know a lot of people are wanting to see that. That would be pretty cool if they could do that. He was visiting them a couple weeks ago, but that was apparently just a visit, not like a workout. But I mean, he's been out of the game for 2 years, so I don't know how much of an impact he could have. Regardless, that would be pretty cool to see Beast Mode return to the Seahawks for one last playoff run. I'm up for that. But yeah, Seahawks are sitting now at 11-4 record. If they do beat the 49ers, though, next week, they still will win the NFC West and then possibly get to the 2 seed. They would need the Saints, and depending on tonight's game, but maybe the Packers will lose to get back to the number 1 seed. But if they lose to the Niners next week too, which with all these injuries, I could kind of now see that happening. So, I mean, they could fall to the 6th seed. All of a sudden, like I was kind of talking about earlier when I was talking about the Niners, with the Seahawks kind of stumbling towards the back end of the season, they definitely seem like a beatable team compared to earlier in the season when they were a team that you did not want to face at all. So Seahawks injuries are piling up, and they're just not looking the same anymore. And now it's looking like they're going to probably be in a wild card team for the playoffs. Next matchup, can't believe this happened because of how banged up the Eagles were, and they continue to lose players in this matchup, and the Cowboys cannot do anything about it. Eagles won 17-9. They're sitting at an 8-7 record. But speaking of the injuries, really quick with the Eagles, Ronald Darby and left with a hip flexor, and JJ Whiteside left with a foot injury, and then Jalen Mills was carted off, but he ended up returning back in the game. Now, Eagles are sitting at an 8-7 record, but that doesn't mean they won the NFC East. They have to win next week against the Giants, and then they can lock in the NFC East, and they'll be the 4th seed. But if the Eagles lose next week to the Giants and the Cowboys end up beating the Redskins, the Cowboys end up winning the NFC East. So even though it was a disappointing loss, the Cowboys still have a chance. If anybody saw the Cowboys plane even had trouble leaving Philadelphia last night, which is pretty funny when you think about it. No news or injuries came out for the Cowboys, but man, what a disappointing season for the Cowboys. They had all the momentum at the beginning of the season, been a major disappointment. They beat up on the Rams last week, and then they go back to being the disappointing Cowboys this week. Just a team you can't trust, and regardless of whoever comes out of this division, I don't really see them doing much come playoff time, because you're talking about an inconsistent team in the Cowboys, and then you're just talking about probably just a way too banged up team in the Eagles to face the other teams within the NFC East. Within the NFC come wild card weekend. We'll see what happens. I'll give my prediction on the games. I could definitely still see the Giants upsetting the Eagles come Sunday, but tune into Friday's episode to see where I stand on that. But yeah, the NFC East winner is still up to be decided. And then going into the Sunday night game again, I kind of wish they would have flexed out this game for either. I mean, shoot, I would have rather watched that Eagles-Cowboys game on Sunday night on prime time. It was a closer matchup. I don't know. I still don't understand why they kept this matchup, but Chiefs beat up on the Bears 26-3. Chiefs are now sitting at a 11-4 record. They're currently at the number 3 seed. As I talked about, they just need to beat the Chargers next week, and they will lock in the 3rd seed. And then if somehow the Dolphins were to pull off the upset against the Patriots, they can slide into the number 2 seed and get the first round bye. Seems like they're destined to be the 3rd seed. Spencer Ware and Rashad Breeland both tweaked their shoulders against last night, so a couple injuries for the Chiefs. But seems like they're more than likely going to get to a 12-4 record and hope somehow the Dolphins pull off the upset. And then with the Bears, they're sitting at a 7-8 record. Eddie Goldman left with a concussion. Their season, again, they're one of those disappointing teams. I mean, for most people, I actually predicted that they would miss the playoffs. So this was kind of anticipated, at least from my eyes. So, but I know a lot of people had expectations for them to go on not only to the playoffs, but to potentially go on a deep playoff run. And now they're going to evaluate where they want to stand with Trubisky, where they want to stand with most of that roster, and see how this team evaluates their roster going forward. But yeah, guys, quick episode for you today. Like I said, there's just not a lot to talk about with it being the week between that week 17 to week 17 time of the year, and with it being Christmas too. I got things to do. I know you guys got things to do, so I just want to get you guys out of here. And then Rob's question of the week. Lots of injuries this year, especially at the quarterback position. What do you think has been the biggest, most impactful injury of this season? Oh, man. Obviously you would have to talk about Andrew Luck. I mean, I'm not trying to be biased here, but if he enters this season 100% healthy, you could argue the Colts season goes a lot differently, and they're more likely in the playoffs. And with how weak the AFC is, they're more likely having a chance to compete for the Super Bowl this year. So that seems like the most obvious one. If you want to eliminate him and maybe look at other ones, I mean, I can kind of see where Nick Foles affected the Jaguars season. Yeah, Gardner Minshew kind of was fun in the middle of the season. I know Foles got benched when he came back, but maybe if Foles was 100% healthy throughout the season, maybe the Jaguars' beginning of the season goes a lot differently. I could see that being different. I just can't help but think Luck missing this year, retiring because of all the injuries, had the most impact. And you could argue that they would have won the division, and that's probably why. So I'm going to lean towards that. And I mean, you can also say maybe even Mahomes, when he injured his kneecap, maybe that knocked them out of a chance because they end up, he wasn't 100% healthy when they faced the Titans and they lost to the Titans. So maybe if they win that game against the Titans, they're now sitting at the number 2 seed. So, I mean, there's some small injuries that happened throughout the season that maybe affected some losses that affected seedings as well. So, but I lean towards Luck being the biggest impact. Other than that, guys, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Obviously, if you like what you hear, please hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. If you want the audio version, you can always listen to the Cody Talks NFL audio version on the Blitzalytics Podcast Network. We're on a lot of different podcast platforms like Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Just Google Blitzalytics Podcast Network, and I'm sure you can find us. And then also on there, I can't believe we're at our last episode. Not sure when it's going to come out. I got to get together with my co-host, Rob, to find a time that we can record our last episode of the Fantasy Football Hot Seat. We're going to give our awards, like an all hot seat team for this past year. And then we'll be taking a break until an off-season episode. And then obviously, guys, I know it's 2 days before Christmas, but if you want to get some late gifts, go check out our store. Go to blitzalytics.com, click the store button. Tons of Blitzalytics apparel you could check out. You maybe give it as a late gift, maybe give it as a birthday gift. Anybody's got a birthday coming up over the next months. But please go check out our store anytime you guys are looking for some T-shirts or if you guys want to support us in any way. Other than that, thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great holiday. Whatever you guys celebrate, have a happy holidays, have a Merry Christmas, and enjoy your week with your family and friends. Blitz out.
Thank you for watching Cody Talks NFL, presented by Blitzalytics.com. As always, hit that like and subscribe button, and then hit that bell notification icon to stay up to date on all things football.